I'm just going to introduce our BuddyPress site to you and mention 3 mighty useful plugins that we use on our sort of intranet style. It's more extranet style actually. Students typically log onto it right up till 2 AM in the morning to finish their homework. Submit it. Alright, here we go. BuddyPress adds these components onto WordPress. So you get extended profiles. You can add additional fields apart from the WordPress user profiles. So you start to have a lot of users in your site. Account settings, so they can delete their own profile if they're finished and they've left and they don't want to hang around, and change other settings like their email address, etc. Friend connections, so you can either call them friends or you can rename it if you wish, if you don't want to return friends. And private messaging, that's pretty much what it says it is, and activity streams and user groups. The last one being the real thing that we wanted. We wanted our user groups to basically be synonymous with our classes, but we wanted a little bit more than our classes. So we have a class, might have up to 18 students and 1 teacher, and that would be 1 group in our user groups. But we don't just have 1 or 2 classes. We're running, starting from next week, we're going to have about 30 classes, and they come into different streams and different times. So the first plugin I'm going to talk about is groups can have a hierarchy. You can have parent groups, child groups, or even grandchild groups. So I think that's the first plugin we'll talk about. Alright, that's a quick look at what it looks like. It is a walled garden, so unfortunately I can't give you the address or anything like that. And if you do find it, please don't create an account because it's for our students and teachers. So we've personalised it a little bit. We've got my groups here, so any groups that students or staff belong to, they'll come up list on the homepage. Your friends, if they're up there, and any achievements that have been scored recently. We've got group events here, so that's a bit of an idea of what it looks like from the homepage. And it looks a lot like BP default, which I've deliberately left it that way because it makes it easier. Alright, so I mentioned groups can have a hierarchy, and that's great, but they exist as their own groups. So even if we have a parent group, so we have a whole bunch of academic English classes, we have a bunch of general English classes, and we have a bunch of business English classes as well. So we wanted to have a parent group so that senior managers or even other teachers could have a look at what other groups were doing or just get an overview. But because each child group acts independently, if something happens in one of those child groups, you can look at the top and you won't see anything unless you've got BP group hierarchy propagate. So everything that happens in the child groups or in the grandchild groups feeds up, which is fantastic. If you're looking for an overview, you can just look in the activity stream for the parent group, and you've got it. You can see everything that's happening. So that's one thing that we found incredibly useful for our managers, our senior teachers, and senior staff. And just a quick look at what it looks like. It's really tiny, but I'll read it out for you. So this is our academic English group. It is one of our parent groups. And you can see here, I've got, this is me creating an event for one of my EAP2 classes that I'm teaching right now. Here's Cameron, another teacher who's joined the IAP group. It's another group within our academic groups. And here's another one, me doing something with my IELTS class. And that last item is I'm actually sharing a thing. I'm sharing a file through the file sharing system which we're using, which is called BuddyDrive. And if you look right there, it says Hub Drive, because we just named it to do with our brand. Which brings me to the next one. BuddyDrive is created by iMath. Well, that's his username anyway. Matthew is a French guy, and he basically created this file sharing system. Originally we were using group documents, but it kind of died off in its support. BuddyDrive is a little bit better in that it allows you to share any type of file that you allow to be uploaded with friends. Keep it private to yourself. You can password protected, or you can share it with groups. That's what we really want. So we're sharing it with groups. We're sharing documents with groups. And there's a tiny screenshot. I'm running the beta version, which I've just added in this last column in the back end for downloads, so we can actually track which files are being downloaded more often or not so often. So that's been fantastic, and Matthew, he continues to develop it and make it better. He's got a few other plugins as well. So that's our file sharing, and that's working fantastically for us. Last one, Buddy Mobile Pro. It's $28 for the Pro version, and I think it's been worth it. That's come out of my pocket, but I'm really happy to have it. He's thinking of considering making an iPad version, or tablet size version, as well as another option, but I'll just show you a little bit about that. Not the exact screenshot, that's roughly what it looks like. And the process that I went through to actually get Buddy Mobile working for us was I took one of his default themes and created a child theme, just basically copied it. Had to copy the CSS from one of the default themes to get started, because otherwise it just looked ugly and didn't work. And you can create a functions.php file if you need it. For example, you might want to turn some things off. But one thing I had to realize straight away is when people are looking on a desktop computer, they're actually looking at that child theme. When they're looking on a mobile, they're looking at your mobile theme. So you're running two themes at the same time, which means some of my functions.php, I had to actually move to a special file that comes with BuddyPress called BP Custom. It sits in your plugins folder. That basically is a place to put any functions which are independent of your theme. So that was quite important for us to shift a lot of our privacy and other functions into BP Custom to make sure they work across both themes at the same time. And that's how BuddyPress installed, and thanks, and I'm BPL. Any questions? No time?
No, go.
Oh, yep.
What is the best plugin you use to prevent unwanted users and spammers on BuddyPress? Because you have a site on BuddyPress with like 7,000 fake users into the network and
We also had a huge problem with spam signups initially. We started using Vanguard, which was kind of working, but only partially, until we actually put on a security question. So because we're an English school, I've got two security questions. One of them is, what language do you want to study? And what country are you studying in? And we can help people answer that question. Just adding a security question has been enough to stop 100% of the spam. So I'd recommend that. It's worked for me.
But you still kept receiving the requests or not?
They still try, but because there's a security question there, they don't get through. So if you're trying Vanguard, try adding a basic security question like something related to the content of your site or your type of site that anybody can answer, any human can answer. So that's what we've done, and that's worked for us. Great.
Thanks, Vernon. Awesome. I'm glad you guys have kept an eye on who's up next, because I didn't write that down.
I wasn't saying that.
They've got their pop ticket and put it in stuck up their thumbs.
That's right. Okay, so I'm going to talk about importing content into WordPress. Let me get to it. like an intro
Oh,
slide.
yeah, look at the whole slide. Brilliant.
So who am I? Like I haven't been to many of these things. I've been to a couple, but not many. So I'm a web developer. I work at Flint Interactive in Collingwood. I've been working on and off with WordPress since 1.2, so 9 years. You didn't want to work with WordPress 1.2, trust me. I'm on Twitter, I'm now trying it. So we all know what WordPress is. It's in most minds it's a blogging engine, but also when coupled with the custom content types and taxonomies, it's an awesome CMS. It's essentially your content lives in WordPress. But it's like, how does this content get into WordPress? Like, are you gonna, so if it's a new site, you're gonna enter it via WP admin, and that's the most simple way to do it, I guess. But if there's existing content, what are your options? Basically importing, or using very patient people, but I'm going to talk about importing because I don't know patient people. Are there patient web developers? So importing into WordPress, what options are there? Tools, import? Talk over, any questions? Okay. Tools, import. There's a limited list of supported formats. None are all that useful, unless you've got a live journal account. Anyone? Okay, no. Not a live journal account here. So these are just a list of services that the default importer supports. Of those, I can see that maybe 3 are somewhat useful, 1's really useful, and the one that's useful is WordPress. Who here has used the tools WordPress importer? Good, cool. Don't know what I'm doing here. Good. Basically, yeah, most of these are blog focused. They match very specific use cases, so it's all kind of generally about important posts, but WordPress can be so much more than just a blog, which I'm guessing, given the focus of this meetup, a lot of people know. Yeah, live journal, as I said. Yeah, does anyone use anyone other than WordPress? Wait, anyone?
Tried RSS on the way.
Yeah, I tried it once as well, but didn't really see the point. But anyway, so yeah, the only really useful importer is WordPress. It uses WXR, which is WordPress extended RSS. So, aka just a big load of XML. There's not much in the web documentation. I'm looking at one person I know who works for Automatic. Like, have I just missed it, or?
Yeah, WXR.
Yeah, I wish I'd known that. It's not all that good prior to what I did at some point with it. So yeah, WordPress exports it. That's about it. It's not like a well-used format. You can learn more about importing content and all the tools that. I think there's a few more tools that are actually listed by default in the WordPress admin. So I think that page contains a bit more. Again, none very useful or very blogging focused. So a bit about me and WordPress. I work as a developer at an agency. I very rarely use WordPress as a blog tool. I use primarily the CMS, custom post types, custom taxonomies, custom fields, ACF, etc. Custom themes, etc. So how useful is importing content in this use case? Like, can I use tools-import? Let's find out. So last year, Flint were approached by Sneak Freak to redevelop their aging website, which was basically a bespoke CMS written in Zen framework. Anyone ever come across the Zen framework used as a CMS? Poor person. Unless you wrote Sneak Freak's original CMS, in which case we need to have words. That situation, it matched WordPress so incredibly well. I'm one of the only developers that really kind of champion WordPress at Flint. And when I saw this opportunity to use WordPress for them, I just knew it was going to be the best bang for their buck, and kind of give them the website that they deserved after years of just dealing with something proprietary. So old site had over 10,000 articles, even more kind of images, videos, etc. attached to those articles, associated taxonomies, distinct content types. Somehow all this content needed to get into WordPress. I mean, the options. someone said leave the old site behind. I don't know if anyone's into SEO here, but like, your hair would have turned grey if you heard that. Manually migrate, again, patient people, or interns, as I think they're known in the magazine business. Or tools import. I don't think I've mentioned the pain and stress of the grey hair this caused, but I chose to go with WXR. I chose to like think, oh, this might have some kind of, kind of value. But, I was thinking I lacked a better option as well. I was being kind of idealistic as well, saying, I'm going to do this for WordPress way, because if I don't do things for WordPress way to begin with, I'm going to end up with a site that kind of doesn't match the ethos of WordPress, and thinking, big mistake. So I created a script to convert 10,000 articles into WXR. Yeah. It basically became a gigabyte XML file. Yeah, it sounds so stupid now. Sure, never do this. Ever. Find a better way. Or find about 16 gigs of RAM. One or two. So mainly, seriously, the main issue with WXR, like all XML, is complex. Creating it yourself is painful. I mean, there's tools to do it, but I wouldn't. It's not worth it when there's other options, which I'll get to later. WXR import process is pretty opaque in the browser. So you upload this file, and I didn't upload the give one file, don't worry. You only know when it's failed. You don't, and it will fail and continue, and you just end up with a situation where, with all the taxonomies and all the media and stuff, you end up with, you don't know what state of database is in when it fails. And doing it for anything larger than a few megabytes in the browser is flaky. The issues are just around memory consumption on shared hosting, timeouts, and because it will actually pull in the external media for you if you've got hosted images elsewhere. And doing it via command line is still a bit of a black box, but it works eventually because you have the control to kind of set your environment to not time out and to not just go, I can't. So in this instance, screw WXR. Should have said that earlier, but I said it soon enough before I kind of gave myself a heart attack. I mean, so I had to find something else to do instead. And it's like, what can you do? Like, insert the content into your database correctly. It might work if you intend to stay on WordPress version 3.1 or whatever forever, but with the auto update, that's also not the way to do it in terms of WordPress ethos. So after hours of Googling and venturing deep into codecs, there are better options. Mainly core WordPress functions. Why did I not realize this sooner? But so this is slightly skewed to CMS use case. Well, what makes a WordPress site? And what I'm going to list here is kind of when you're using it as CMS. So posts and pages and kind of all the custom post types. Post meta, which is your custom fields and kind of the hidden stuff that WordPress uses for management and stuff. Taxonomies and media. When important, we need to be able to create all these different types. WordPress is something that requires the WordPress environment. So has anyone ever tried to use WordPress outside of WordPress, i.e. including it into a PHP file and just using functions? Anybody? Cool. I'm not keeping track of how many people. There's not going to be an Excel spreadsheet at the end of this. Because obviously, import content doesn't fit into the template loaded model. So you need to bootstrap WordPress in a separate file, which is literally as simple as doing that. Unless someone's going to tell me otherwise, it seems to work. So already answered that question. So the first thing we need to be able to do is create a post. So there's this function called WP insert post, and it takes an array and it inserts or updates a record in the post table. So here's a bit of an example of the code. You you create an array that matches, like, so the keys of the array match the columns in the WP post table, and then you just call this function. And you put true on the end because you want, like, the thing with important content is you want to know where you're going wrong so you can stop. So you don't end up with this situation where you don't know what you've done or where you've left your database, etc. Although some might argue that's what backups are for. I don't believe in that philosophy. So WP insert post will either return your post ID or it will return WP error if you give true as the second argument to that function. So literally this will create a post type in your table. Scale it up to an array of different posts so you can instruct from a source like a CSV or another database table. You can actually start putting in posts. And hopefully people can see the value in that. So there's also WP insert post will update the post if you give it the ID. So if you set the ID in the array, it will update the post. Whereas sometimes you might not want to do that. You might only want to update a post if it exists, if you want to apply some kind of external content to an existing WordPress site. So fairly similar examples. This will update post 37 directly from the codex, so save me some time. There's a reference for anyone that's interested. I will put these slides online at some point, probably tomorrow. So after you've created a post, you're going to want to create like post meta. So say, for example, the CMS, like say you're using advanced custom fields, add post meta is literally that simple. So you take the post ID that you captured in the earlier code, and so say if you had a custom field that was measuring the length or something. So say you were storing details about housing or something, or products or something. So yeah, so that's a pretty straightforward example. Back in, we've done this many times as you want. Like the previous example, you might want to update as well. So in this example, this would either, what would this example be? So this would update the fruit. Okay, so if fruit doesn't exist, or if fruit exists, it will add banana to it, otherwise it will add the banana. I might have done these at lunchtime today, so sorry. Anyway, there's a reference there, you can figure it. So taxonomies, I'm currently working on a site that has about 30 different types of taxonomies. Okay. Never do that. So insert term basically just gives you a way to create a taxonomy, which can then later be attached to a post. Yeah, only a post. Does everyone get that example? So then, once you create the taxonomy, you use this function to actually set the taxonomy on the post and basically, yeah, like associate it. So it's like adding a post to, like tagging a post or adding a post to a category. It can be used with either the inbuilt taxonomies or like tags, categories, formats, or you can actually use it with your own custom stuff. So this is an example of both. So it uses the actual IDs of the categories. So you actually have to go and get those, which kind of adds a bit of complexity to what's kind of outside this example. Again, there's a bit of a reference in the codex. So media was a really difficult one. That's kind of why I stuck with WXR for as long as I did, because you're not going to, programmatically uploading a file, that's crazy curl commands, and no one's going to really want to do that. There's always been a stumbling block because like hosting constraints as well. So generally media will be images. You might have files, you might have like PDFs, Word documents, etc. But if you have an image, WordPress provides a function called media sideload image. And when I found this, I actually said hallelujah in the middle of a busy open plan office. Yeah, so someone obviously thought I discovered something. So this function will download an image and go and grab it from any specified URL and attach it to the post. If you're going to be importing images, don't grab them from random hosting. Download the images and reference them with a local URL on your local host or something, because that's what eats up time when doing this importing. So this is just a quick code example. You need to actually grab some files from WP admin, because this isn't kind of like available by default. It's kind of a hidden admin functionality, but that gives you the building block to get content, to get actual kind of files into WordPress or images. But yeah, it's definitely one of the best things I've found, like discovered, that seems to be kind of lesser known than some other functions. So in conclusion, hopefully this gives you some ideas, and you know, if you've got some kind of site you need to kind of seed with content, maybe it gives you some thinking. Slides will be online tomorrow. Follow me on Twitter or watch my web page. And any questions?
What does the media sideload image function return?
It will return a formatted image tag, so as in like a HTML tag, yeah, with a reference to the thing. I'm not sure if it fails, if it returns false or WP error, but it's definitely this guy. Yeah, so any other questions? Cool, I'm going to sit down and I feel like I've talked for very, very long time.
Hi, I'm McDonald. I'm a freelance WordPress developer, and I'm just going to be talking this evening on some development and deployment strategies that I've found that have really optimised and sped up my workflow. So hopefully they're hopefully something will be useful for you guys as well. Most of these require familiarity with the shell or terminal commands. I mean, I use a Mac, so I'm using terminal, but these should be transportable across Unix, any Unix-based platform. The first one that I've found really helpful is dynamic virtual hosts on my local host. I run a lot of WordPress sites locally, like you can see there's a list of them there. Sometimes I think there's 83 sites there. So what I used to do when I created a new site was go to the vhost file, create a new entry, reload Apache, and then there's my new site. But what I discovered online is a thing called dynamic virtual hosts. So basically what it does, it creates what's called wildcard subdomains. So I can have the site name .localhost as the website. So all I need to do is create a folder, like in my sites folder. So I'll create a folder called website, and I'll put some code in there. Okay, and now I haven't touched my vhost, I haven't set up anything in Apache, and now I can just load that site. Oop. Working. So creating that folder, I should be able to.
Put another slash on the end of localhost.
You're missing a code on the HTTP.
That's what it is, yeah. Yeah, and now I've loaded that site. So yeah, I found that really useful. And how that works, and then see if there's the site there. So basically how that works is using, I found that on these two links here. I'll give you the links to the slides after the talk, but I came across these on those two links there, and those two links explain it in depth. But basically what's happening is we're using a tool called DNS Mask, which basically sets up a local DNS folder on your machine. And if you use, the easiest way to install that on Mac is using a package called Homebrew. Are many of you familiar with Homebrew? It's basically a package manager for OS X. So similar to what people on Linux, people use package managers to install software. Homebrew simulates that on a Mac. So if you've got Homebrew installed, it's just a basic command on the command line, and then you just have to make some modifications to your virtual host file once. And the last thing I need to do is in my network settings on that device, in the DNS, I'm just saying, when you're looking for DNS entries, look on my local machine first. So it's looking on my local machine first. It's seeing it. It's got a wildcard DNS entry, so it'll match up 20 of those folders on my sites, and then it'll load that site. The next one that I've found helpful is called WP Builder. Is anyone familiar with that? WP Builder. I discovered this one on GitHub. Just doing a search on WordPress related code on GitHub. Basically, what it does, it's a shell script that builds a whole default WordPress site for you. But it gives you the option to choose the theme framework, or you can put your own theme framework in if you want. It sets up your WP config file, also sets up a local version of the WP config file with the default set so you can run debug, all those sort of things. It creates a database, and it also downloads any plugins that you specify in the configuration file as well. And then finally, it just creates a Git repo and does an initial commit. So basically, you're ready to go. So once you install WP Builder, it's just one command. So for example, if I delete all those files out of the website, so I've got that empty website folder there. The only thing you need to do is move in a configuration folder, and in that configuration folder, there's a file called plugins.conf. In that file, I'm just putting all the plugins that I want to pull down from the WordPress plugin repository. So you can put, it's just using the actual URL name of the plugin. And the other folder is called MU plugins, and that's the same thing, but that'll put plugins into the MU plugins folder in WordPress. So in the shell, if I go to that website and I type in WP Builder, and I'll call the site website, and it's giving me the options here for do I want to use a framework? I'll say no, I won't, because I'm on my phone, so it'll take too long. It's downloading WordPress, which could take a little while, hopefully not, on my phone. And then after that, it'll set up the config files, load the database, download those plugins, and set up the site. I'll just leave that running while I keep talking. But basically all that is a shell script, and you can modify that shell script to pretty much do anything you want. So I mean, you can take that a lot further. You can see now it's downloaded WordPress, it's installed the theme, and now it's downloading those plugins. That's from a repo on GitHub by a guy called Aaron Holbrook. And there's some interesting stuff on that. If you go to that repo, some of the pull requests and some of the forks that people have done on that have been quite interesting and gave me some good ideas. So you can see now it's complete. It's built the site. So if I go to my website, localhost, there's my WordPress site all built with one command. So using that and the previous thing has really helped to speed up my workflow. The next, I mentioned must-use plugins earlier. I found them quite interesting too, and helpful in WordPress development. Basically, what they are and how they're defined in the codex, they're plugins that you install into the MU plugins folder, which sits at the same level as the normal plugins folder inside the WP content folder. So it sits in that site. I've just created again. You can see MU plugins. Okay, and by default, I put a couple of MU plugins in there. I put one called user switching, which if I log into that site and there's multiple users, I can just in the admin on the users, I can just switch and become that user. So and that's really useful. And the other one I put in there is just remove WP menu, and all that does is remove the WordPress logo from the top. WP plugins, they're quite interesting what you can do with them, I suppose, because they don't show in the normal list of plugins on the website. So if you've got a client who's an admin user, then and sometimes there may be plugins that you want to hide from the client. Might be things like your helper plugins, or that you use every time. There might be could even be your custom post type plugins that you don't want the client to see. Anything that you don't want the client to see, or that may run the risk if the client disables them. They break the site, you can put them into MU plugins, and they won't show that list of plugins. They're always enabled, and they're loaded before normal plugins as well. Some use cases, which I just said, good way to hide stuff from clients. Good for helper functions that you use on every site. But one caveat to be careful of is that they're not checked for updates by the auto update system in WordPress. So there may be some workarounds there, or keep that in mind. And the last one, the last thing that I've found really helpful is just deployment using Git, which I spot. Do many people here use Git? Yeah. Git with post receivables has been really helpful for me as well. I mean, you met a long time ago before Git was all FTP, to deploy, that sort of thing. Now what I've been able to do with Git and what's called a post receivable is just put my deployment down to like one command, git push test, and that'll push my site to the test server. Or, for example, if I want to go to live, git push live, I'm going to push my site to the live server. So how I've done that is I've set up what's called SSH aliases. So, for example, I've got in my SSH folder, I've got my config file, and here's all my sites here. So you can see all these configs here. So, for example, that site there, I've given it an alias of the website name -L. So -L I use for live, -S I use for staging, -T for test, and so on. It just saves typing out the host name all the time. So then I've got my local. So first of all, what I would do initially, there's a little bit of work to set this up initially, but once it's set up, it really is a time saver. But you do get to spend some time to get it right at the start. So I'd go onto say the live site, for example, and I'd just run that. I'd run those commands there, and that's as easy as just pasting them into the command line on the live site. So what that's doing is it creates a bare Git repo on the live or the test site, but it creates it back in the root folder, like before the public HTML folder, and then we also create a file inside that repo, which is called a post receive hook. So what happens is when I do the push up to that repo, the post receive hook then runs this command here and takes those files and checks them out to the theme folder on that server. So then back up. So I've created my SSH alias. I've set up that remote bare repo on the test of the live server. Then back on my local repo, I just let Git know that I want to add a new remote. I'm calling it live, and it refers to the name that I use in the SSH alias, so website L, whatever. So then that way, all I need to do, as I said before, is when I'm committing locally, if I want to push to the test server, I just run that command, git push test. I use an alias for that as well. I sometimes shorten it to GPT, or git push live GPL. I've thought about putting that into WP Builder as well, so I can take that a step further with WP Builder and set up those repos inside that script as well. So maybe take out the manual part of that stage. And I originally found that concept on this side here, on that side here. That's it. Thanks very much. I'm on Twitter, GitHub, and there's my email. Thank you.
approach in the session. Hi, I'm James from Creative Approach. Today I'm just going to talk about responsive workflow in WordPress. Look, it's not really WordPress specific, it's just sort of some ideas on how I develop responsive websites and sort of some little tips and tricks that I've learned over the time. I've sort of made the assumption that a lot of people here understand the whole concept of responsiveness with websites. If you don't, it's fairly straightforward. It's simply just a case of taking one design using CSS media queries, just adapting that design for the device or the screen size that it's coming through. So that's sort of just a nice little visual there. The way I approach sort of my projects, it's no different to how I approach any website project. I mean, pretty much anything that's done nowadays is done on a responsive layout, and I sort of have 6 things that I do. And originally, obviously, I'm looking at the design of the site, and that's the site structure. And first of all, I'm obviously working out how the site is going to look on each device. A lot of people go, well, there is a train of thought that you start on the smallest size and work your way up. I don't do that, which is probably a bad thing maybe. I design for the desktop and work my way down. It's just the way I like to work. I find it's easier to clean it at the end rather than sort of work out what I'm adding as I go up. Next step for me is obviously the CSS. I'm working out my media queries, and I'll go a bit more into detail on that in a minute. Then I'm looking at my WordPress code as it relates to the content, and again, there's not really a huge amount there. Typically, in regards to that, it's just potentially just putting counters in when you're calling the loop, and it's just, you're going to need some CSS breaks occasionally on each device, so you're simply just putting counters. But to be honest, it's the same as running any WordPress site really, from what I find. Then I typically do a lot of fixing things, and what I mean by fixing things is just simply, okay, I've got to get back into each media query and add or change things I want to do, and spending time on IE, checking components. Testing, more testing, and then performance tweaking. So probably my first thing is getting my framework. And I don't really use a framework as such. I don't know if anyone in the past used Less framework. It was one of the earliest ones that came out for responsive layout. And it was really good, and then they stopped supporting it, and I had a couple of clients come back and say, can we make changes here, there, and everywhere, and I was stuck with a framework that supported it. So I actually use something called GridPack, and it's not a framework, it's just simply a grid. It just makes a grid. It's as simple as that. It's simple code, it's nice and easy. You basically go in, you set your canvas, you set your breakpoints, you set your columns, your paddings, everything there. You hit download, it downloads a nice CSS file for you, it has it all in there, put a fantastic example of code there. It's just a simple, normal nested thing. There's a row, put your columns on the span. One of the benefits I find with this is, number one, it's really simple. It's not tied to anything else. I can tie it to my site, and then actually it's really easy to retrofit. So I don't know if anyone gets any requests to go back and make existing sites responsive. It's actually very, very easy to do it with the code here. It's very, very simple to do it. Not a big job, and you can charge lots of money for it. So I'm a big fan. Bullshit battles. Moving on from there, obviously I'm managing the style sheets here. Look, typically on WordPress you put your style CSS, and that's what I'm doing to manage the entire site. I do keep my grid separate. It basically contains my base framework, which is going to work my entire layout for the desktop, so to speak. And then what I'm doing is I'm putting in my media queries at the end. I typically use the standard at media, minimum width and max width. When I set the grid, I do set them at the basis of like the 320, 480 that people sort of recommend, but I actually change them to meet the design. Once the site's sort of finished and we're tweaking at the end, I just change them to make the design flow the way I want it to flow, and typically that comes in handy with navigation. Navigation is probably the biggest pain in the arse really, especially if you have sort of your navigation in a column and your logos next to it. You're limited in space, but as you drag, if you're using a modern browser, as you drag it down, you can see how it reacts. And typically what I do is I drag it, and once that point breaks, I'll just measure that window and set the media query to that. So yeah, it's probably a really waste of time, but it's the way I like to do things. I do use the device width on some things, but generally it's just for cleaning stuff out. If you use CSS transitions, they have a tendency to look awful on phones, tablets, especially if you're using like a code where they don't come into effect until you scroll to the point. typically you'll scroll down your phone and all of a sudden you're seeing stuff and all of a sudden it's fading in and zooming out left, right, so I just turn it off. And I use the device because I still want it to work on my browser, but I don't want it to work on the device. Navigation, pretty straightforward. I don't use any plugins or anything. I keep things pretty lean. I use the standard WordPress menu, and then I just put in a simple script that just adds a navigation before. Turn it off with CSS display now and put it on the other devices that I want. Works well. It's pretty straightforward. I mean, most people know this sort of stuff. I hope. Images is probably the biggest thing with the sites, especially with retina screens. Typically nowadays, I'm putting logos in SVG format. It just allows you to scale it without a problem. And what I typically do is set it as a background image, and I use background size to manage the sizing on it, depending on the device. I'm not using anything fantastic for my image fixes. I use width 100%. And if you set your grid up right, it works without a problem. The only thing that I say to people is, obviously sometimes if you're using a 4-column layout and you're going to take those, or you're using 12 columns, sorry, and you're using a span of say 3, the images on the desktop might actually be smaller than when you go down to a mobile device if you're responding that way. So typically in WordPress I set up an image function to actually do the biggest image, so I scale it down for the desktop, I have the right size for that. And then I do have a responsive fix that I always chuck in, which is good. So if you're using WooCommerce or anything like that, 100% is great, but if you know they like to use PayPal logos and things like that, it just ends up being huge and pixelated. So I do stick a fix in there. And then for icons, I use Font Awesome, which is, I don't know how many other people use Font Awesome, but it's really good until they change it overnight and then change all the way you reference the fonts in each project. Absolutely cheat sheet that tells you what the fonts are. But probably the biggest thing is the retina fix for a lot of things nowadays with retina screens. If you've got people doing images in Photoshop, there's a fantastic action called Retinize It, and that will basically, you just run the action script and it opens up in both formats for you to allow you to save. I did used to use the Retina JavaScript script, retina.js.com. Basically, I don't bother with that anymore, but I've put it on there anyway, because if you're using a site, and typically with WordPress you are expecting people to upload media, I've started using this great little plugin that's come out, it's called WP Retina 2 times, and that actually runs that script. And what it does is anytime you import anything into your media library, it's going to create both file formats for you. And with that script in there, it basically serves the image that you want to the device, and you can actually retrofit with it as well with regenerate thumbnails. And then with videos or anything I have used Fitbit. Sometimes with you, if you're pulling things in from YouTube or anything like that, you can actually trick it by just using percentages all the time. You can actually set iframes to a percentage width. You can generally work your way around that. Alright, for testing, if you're on a Mac, happy days, because you can download Xcode and use the iOS simulator, which is brilliant. Online, once the site's on testing, I use responsive language in that, and then I've got a plugin on Chrome, responsive site view. I mean, look, if you've got your code right and you've got your grid right, there's so many different device screens out there, so it can be a bit of a nightmare, but I think as long as you get your breakpoints right, it's always going to look nice, it's always going to work the right way. Really on the fixing side of things, anyone that's done this, Internet Explorer below 9 can't stand media queries, so you're going to have to you basically have to create another style sheet just for that, rip out any media query. It's not a big task, you basically just put your grid in, but outside of the media query and it will fix itself. As I said before, I like to remove transitions because they don't work very well. And then it's really checking scripts, and it's not that much of an issue anymore because sliders, most people develop sliders, anything actually using responsibly. But if you're using a carousel, something that's sort of displaying 6 images, and if you're sort of allowing the user to import like logos across the bottom, and it's going to show 6 and it's going to scroll through. As the device gets smaller, you don't really want those 6 images to get really small. So a little thing I use is the if window and set the width. And generally, you change from 6 to 3 or whatever suits the design. And then finally, performance tweaking. It's just the normal stuff really. Clean code, try and keep it lean. I mean, use a CDN. There is a tool called Adaptive Images. There's a WordPress plugin for that, and you can set it up yourself if you're not a big plugin fan. But if you use a CDN, it basically splits the dummy. So you just go to the CDN, it's like fine. And That is it, thank you.
James?
Yes.
Have you found the iOS simulator to be a bit
Used to-
crapola?
It's not bad. I mean, the problem I find now is they just updated it. Now the screen's so big. That's what it used to be. It used to fit nicely on the screen, and now you can scroll. I mean, generally, the difficulty is sort of if you pick up any, if you go to like frameworks and they say, oh, we're breaking it at 320, we're breaking it at 480, we're breaking it at 780. or something. Typically, I find the biggest problem with that is when you're on a tablet, your design looks beautiful, basically landscape, and then when you flick to portrait, you don't necessarily want your tablet portrait looking as your mobile landscape, which is what they sort of gear you towards. Simply because, you know, on a mobile you might have a full width image, and on a tablet it's like freaking massive if you don't make it that big. So I generally find for media queries, I sort of just, in the browser, I will just use like Firefox and I'll scroll my browser down, and when the design breaks, I'll add the query. So basically, as long as it's always a smooth transition. I mean, ultimately with your media queries, well, what I typically do for the smaller things is, you know, most sites are in some form of container. So I just set the container width at, say, 96% and set the margins at like 4% to the side. And what that does is it just gives you that little buffer inside. But I don't necessarily have a problem. By doing that, I sort of don't trust the machines, to be honest.
That was always like, compared to a real iPad or a real iPhone, there's some experience. Even CSS rendering.
Yeah, I mean, look,
It's frustrating.
it's hard, but I mean, I'm not I don't know, but maybe I'm not one of these people that says, oh, every website should look exactly the same on every device. You know, I don't believe in school. I mean, I know statistically people rave about mobiles because you know, everyone can say, oh, well, there's more mobiles than computers, but I mean, I don't know for everyone else. I do look at websites on my mobile, but it's still not my main usage for browsing the internet. And an analogy I used it earlier was, you know, statistically you can use that for anything. Like if I was developing a film, I could say, oh, I'm developing my next movie, not for the cinema, but for the phone, because there's more phones than cinemas. It just doesn't. Surround sound on my phone is magic. So I really just adapt the screen, the queries to the design.
One of the tools I started using recently, I don't know if you picked up on it, but new versions of Firefox, you actually go in and inspect the element, and there's, it kind of looks like Firebug, and in the corner there's a little button, and it cuts down the screen, brings up a drop down of all different screen sizes and resize it for you automatically.
Yeah.
I found it really handy.
There's one on Google Chrome that I use, and I can't think what it's.
There's one built into DevTools there.
Yeah, there's a few. I sort of drove myself a bit bonkers, like with all the devices, because everything comes out with a different screen size and everything. So I just sort of hit a point where I thought, look, as long as I know the design is clean in whatever screen it's in, I know whatever someone's using is pretty much going to work, and that's why I pretty much customise the queries.
Yeah, so I think what you said with IEA, how do you tackle those?
Oh, basically it doesn't like media queries. So if you basically put all your CSS within the media query for every single screen size you've got. All you need to do for IEA is just simply pull your grid out from the media query. So, and then you just stick it in another style sheet. So so it's just basically not in the media query. So if you've got your columns and your spans, all those percentages that the site works on, you just basically rip it out, put it in a CSS style sheet that only loads in IE9 or IE8 below. Just make sure if it's not in the media query, it will still register it. So it's a very, very quick and easy fix. Look, with grids and stuff, when you get down to IE7, there's a lot of padding issues.
Thanks, James.
good work in the end. Or maybe it happened now.
That is my screensaver, by the way. It's not a trick. I'm my name's Adrian, and I'm doing a presentation tonight, hopefully nice and quick, about premise membership sites. Not really about customising premise, but sort of showing how you can use it to create a nice site, membership site that is quite pleasing for customer experience and getting people involved in your site or client site, whichever comes your way. So, what I've got for you, so I just want to explain what premise is. Yeah, that's me. I love my cow onesie. So, talking about what premise is, I'll show you very quickly how to set up a basic membership site, how to customise the sign-up experience, creating subscription products, customising the content or controlling the content, showing you a few custom functions, and there is a slide coming of the Sound of Music reference because I adore Julie Andrews, as you probably saw on the slide. Okay, so have people used premise here? Hands. Do people know or have heard of premise before? Okay, so premise is a plugin that was launched quite a few years ago. It was launched initially as a landing page software where you can create landing pages, you can optimise them for SEO, do some custom CSS, and it's great for people's websites. A couple of years ago, they introduced a membership model. And the membership model just allows you to create, obviously, a membership site, and you can create, do a whole lot of different things. This is not really to be a comparison to other membership plugins that are out there. It's I've always used Premise from day one, and then I started using the membership module. I have used Wishlist, I've used S2 Member, I've also used the member plugin from WP Dev. And I've always come back to Premise just because of the ease of being able to use it. It's really easy to use, easy to set up. Excuse me. It's got lots of customisable shortcodes. You can create subscriptions, both free and premium, so paid ones, digital products as well. What I liked about this plugin over other kinds of plugins, I've seen a couple of examples. It's a once-off payment with no ongoing cost to you, so there's no payment for upgrades or support, etc. You can have unlimited members. I've seen some of the plugins where they ask you for a monthly payment for a certain amount of members, and then you need to increase as the membership grows. And if that was me, I'd probably be on like a $50 payment a month, which is a bit ouchy, I guess, for a year. You can drip content or delay content to people, so when they join the membership site, they see some content, and then a week later, or how many days you specify, they then see some other content, so you can create a course out of it, which is very handy. You can create lots of different access levels, and you can create tiered access levels. You can protect website content by having it display only to members or having it display by to particular access levels, so you can then hide it from the general public. It also has hooks and filters built in, which you can hook into and filter information when you're creating the process. And you can create coupons as well. So if customers are looking to give potential members a bit of a discount, a bit of an incentive to join up, they can create coupons as well. So membership sites, if you aren't getting approached to create one yet, the ones you are likely to create is one for a community. So that could be like a kindergarten or a health club or something where they need some kind of community environment, or an education course. So someone might come to you and say, I'm an expert in this field, I've got Hollywood videos, I want to create courses for people. That's probably another reason to create a membership site, so they can have a quiet little area to talk to people who are interested in them to engage with their content. And okay, so how am I going to do this? That wasn't the end of the video, by the way. How can I tab out of... Sorry, does anyone know how I can tab out to our presentation?
You go through it now.
Yeah. That's the Meetup page, that's right-hand side. Okay. So this is a demo site that I've got set up ready to go. It is just a demo site. This is scattered with lots of sample music references. So I am using Genesis in this instant. I know it's another copy blogger product, but I do like to use Genesis. It is just easy to use with their child themes. So to start off with, when you go into to create a website, so when you add Premise plugin into your WordPress dashboard, you'll be set up with, firstly, the Premise and the landing page tab in the sidebar there. In the Premise tab, there'll be a settings area. You get an API key upon purchase, and you enter your API key, hit the save the settings, and then the membership module will then display. In the settings area, you'll also see some integration with Aweber, Constant Contact, and MailChimp. So you can have all those lists set up for when people purchase a subscription or they purchase a product. From this page here, there's obviously 3 pages there that you need to set up to start with, and they're the 3 pages that customers are most likely to interact with when they come to a client site. So, for instance, we've got the checkout page, and checkout page is obviously where they enter in all their customer details, and they then go to PayPal, etc. I'll just show you an So checkout page, client. Look like that. But because I'm already logged in, I don't remember. It doesn't give you anywhere to go, but that's a checkout form. And all these are done by shortcode. So you just add a little snippet of code into a page or post, and it creates that form for you ready to customise. It doesn't come already looking like that, although it will use theme-specific CSS, but in 2012, that's what it looks like with the checkout form. So that's what it looks like. If I went into the page, that's the checkout form shortcode, and there's a whole heap of parameters there that you can use to customise what particular areas of the checkout form say. So that's something you can do with that. The next page you create is a login page, so obviously you need people to log in and log out of your site. This is totally separate from the WordPress login logout page. So when people log into your site, they don't have a WordPress toolbar above, they can't go to user profile area and update all their information. They are totally separate from all of that, which means down below, the next one is a member profile page. And it's exactly the same as the, it looks exactly the same as the checkout form. And this is where they would, excuse me, do all the things like, excuse me, I'm doing some words. This is where they would do all their things like update their name, their email address, and password, etc. And obviously you can't update the username at all. So that's the profile page. You then set up, make sure you have that checked for membership, so you can create recurring memberships. And then what you would do is go in and create a product. And the product is, you can create free ones, you can create paid ones, you can create memberships, you can create just standalone products. Cheers. And if I go into this edit area, it's like a custom post type. So you enter in obviously the name of the product, you enter in some details there, and you can use HTML tags, and I'll just explain why in a moment. You'll find a thank you page, so when people go through the checkout process, they've been to PayPal, they come back or wherever you're sending them to, they get shown a thank you page, so you need to assign that as well. And that's how you set up the details with regards to payment, whether it's a subscription, the amount of days, etc., etc. A little bit further down is where you can assign, you can send someone an email receipt, and in this big box here is where you can customise what's in the email. This is also shown on the thank you page, and again there's shortcodes down there to further customise the experience. And there's got some product name and detail and pricing, which I'll show you in just a moment. That's where you integrate your Aweber or MailChimp. So I've got Aweber set up at the moment, and when they come to the thank you page, they're then sent the confirmation email that they have to click, etc., and they're signed up into a list. On the side here, we've got the access levels, and that's kind of like how you use tags in posts, where you can create multiple access levels by separating them with a comma, or you can use pre-existing ones. And this is where you can set up tiered levels. So with this premium membership, they have access to the free as well as video membership, but the free would only have access to the free. So that's where you create your tier. You then just save everything, and then you're given this URL here. So the permalink has the checkout page URL in it, and they've just appended the product ID there. So that is actually your call to action for people to sign up. So if I go into this one, that's, if you see the, you won't see the URL, but that's where the product permalink is added in, and it will take it to the checkout page. What I've done here with Genesis is I've used the Simple Sidebars plugin, and I've created a special sidebar for the checkout page, and I've just created a text widget, and I've used those shortcodes to kind of make it look like a proper checkout page where they get to see the price, the name, and the details, etc., so they know what they're buying into, just to reconfirm everything. Now when it comes to content, you can hide and display content based on access levels, and into this one here. So you've probably seen that I've got a couple of shortcodes in there. So you've got a show to, and you can specify the access level, and they will see the content that's within the opening and closing shortcode tags there. Underneath is a hide from shortcode, and that means that the content will be hidden from that particular access level. So for instance, I've got a little message there to indicate to people who aren't logged in or don't have access that they need to sign up for access to get to be able to see that video. And you'll see on the side there's also a meta box there that you can also do that if it's on a page-by-page basis. If it's not page-by-page, then you go ahead and use the shortcodes, and that's how you can customise that accordingly. If I quickly bring up Chrome, because I'm actually not logged in here, that's what that message would look like. So if they were logged in, that's what the message would look like. So there's a call to action there for them to sign up if they want to. In terms of custom functionality, just bring up that code here. So this is user logged in will become your best friend when it comes to membership sites. That's really helpful when you're creating specific functions. So that one there, for example, I've taken the Genesis primary widget area, or the primary sidebar, and I've replaced it with a special one that I've then called below. And you probably just do that with templates. And there's custom widgets as well. And then I've got this specific login, logout area. So you might notice here there's just a login link there, and that will take you to the login form. If I went back up here, you notice that there's a member profile and a logout link, so that's where I've used that custom functionality to be able to just show that when they're logged in, and that would just take them, that would actually log them out if they clicked on the logout, and you'll see that there's a shortcode there that I'm calling in with the undo shortcode there. And under here is a special action that's specific to premise, and in the checkout page I had some custom text just up above the sign up area, and that's where you would add all that in. So that's the custom functionality. And that is pretty much it. I do have some videos. If you just Google premise plugin, I come up on the Google search results, and I'm just here under right cloud, so that's where I am. And that's pretty much it.